now. Oh, what a strike that is!
Nice, Trixie. Emily Owen hoops it up towards Una Lou again.
To Silver. Una Lou, and yeah! She gets that first goal of the season.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Women's Football Debrief, episode 6, with your hosts, Owen Mason and Ben Stevens. First of all, Ben, how are you? You're on Zoom again.
I know, yeah, it's weird not being in the studio, but nice to be on Zoom as always and still going with this podcast.
Yeah, it certainly is. Always, you know, even though it's getting busier by the week, these football weeks and uni for you, I've been putting my feet up. I haven't done any uni work this year. It's all, I don't know what to do myself, but with all the Cheltenham commentary and it's all piling up, isn't it? But at the moment, we can still have time for this podcast. So it's, yeah, really good. Do
definitely
you
when you're in...
Oh yes,
yeah, when you're in
Barcelona.
different countries all the time as well. It's
I know, I'm missing
hard.
games. It's terrible. I'm a part-timer. It's no good. But yeah. But the good thing is, Ben, we've got quite a familiar face on the podcast. Who have we got today?
We are joined by the one and only Mr. Mike Harris. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, chaps. I'm good. Can't believe Owen's been in Barcelona. I can't imagine him in Barcelona. I can talking to the locals and having a good chat about God knows what. But yeah, chaps, thanks for having me on and good to see you both again.
Very much. Yeah, no, so that was a good trip. That was Barcelona. It was too many beers, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. There you go. But right. So Mike, we've had a bit of a storied career over the last 10 or so years. If we look back at, you know, first of all, though, how are you? You were a bit of a busy man at the moment. You always are busy. I remember last year when we were, you know, closely tied with Cheltenham, we were always off going somewhere. I always remember after Emo's wedding, you were straight to Worcester Uni for some lecturing. So you'd say still as busy, or how is it at the moment with the workload?
Yeah, it's a bit quieter than last year, thankfully. I am currently working at Malvern College, working with the football teams there in the independent schools sector, and I've just finished the league season with the Worcester Uni girls, and on to the cup rounds now. But I think we'll chat a bit more about that later, won't we? But yeah, thankfully not as busy this year. A bit more balance, and yeah, it's nice to be able to focus on spending time catching up with people and doing things like this, which is always enjoyable.
Great stuff. Yeah, you know, you look back at, you know, over the years, Mike, you've had as you say, a great history with the Uni of Worcester. We'll start with that because, you know, it's a big part of your life in terms of coaching. You know, that must have really shaped you as a coach, really, in those early years. You know, you look at, you know, the varsity that year you had. Well, I was looking at it, and you almost did the quadruple. You were with Stoke, with the Worcester Rules, American football team, and the men's first and second team. Take us through that, because that was a fantastic achievement on all fronts. But first of all, on the Uni front, that was quite the honour for first and second to be at the helm.
Yeah, I was working there with Tom and a chap we'd met, Tim Dudding at the time, through university and through our master's programme. And it was great. It was such an enjoyable group to be part of. I was fortunate enough to be involved in some of the interview processes for the men's team this year, and people still speak about that kind of year and that season that we you know did particularly well across both teams. And I don't know if you knew, but the second team I don't think had won a game in 4 years, so we managed to turn the ship and get them their first wins in a number of years, and that was great. And I was working alongside Tom, whose job was to kick on with the men's team that season, and they did a great job, and we built the program to a really nice place and built it back to what it could be, which is, you know, a well-respected, well-run program, culminating in a varsity win that year with the men's first team. But it really felt like a big kind of group effort, and there was a lot of kind of work that went in across the whole program, really. So that was a really fun season, and nice to top off with a big varsity game win in front of 400 or 500 students against the wonderful Gloucester University, which I know you guys are big advocates of. So I'll try not to enjoy it too much.
I tell you, Ben, he must have started the trend of Worcester beating Gloucester all the time again. I tell you, we can't seem to beat them now, can we? What's going on?
No, I know we haven't seemed to win anything in a long time. So, but no, it's great to see, you know, something like that. And varsity always means so much when you're a part of that uni as well, doesn't it, Mike?
Yeah, and they're great days, aren't they? I mean, just back to last year's one, and probably the best set of varsity games that I'd ever seen. the women's game hadn't previously been very competitive. So whilst I was upset on the day that it was as competitive as it was, it's a good thing for the spectator. It's good for everybody, and it really felt like we'd achieved something at the end of it, you know. And I don't think in previous years that had been the case. So they are special days, and we always joke about, you know, shouldn't bucks mean more, you know, shouldn't winning it, and it does mean a lot. But you know, those days are special for, particularly I think, women's footballers who aren't used to seeing those kind of crowds and that level of support. So yeah, special memories, and long may Worcester continue to win.
Yeah, that varsity game, that women's football game, I was commentating on that game, and it was like a brilliant game of football to watch. And then running across the pitch to you at full time as well, and the emotion in all the girls, like, you must have been so proud of the performance that they put in, because it was a really strong performance by you guys on that day.
Yeah, and we'd had two very different seasons. So Gloucester had won their league, they'd won their League Cup. We'd actually lost our League Cup final, and we finished third in the season at the end. So we really felt like we needed something from it. We felt like just falling short in the cup final was disappointing. So to be able to go and win at varsity was important. I think we learned so much from losing the cup final, and we got some really important experiences from that I think kind of served us really well in that varsity game. And I thought, you know, it was really hotly contested. I felt like by the end of the game we were really good value for it. But again, it was an excellent game of football. It was a really good advertisement, I think, for the growth of women's football. You know, Worcester and Gloucester aren't top-end Premier Bucks teams, but that felt like a real proper cup final. The quality of the goals was excellent, particularly the Gloucester goal that I've rewatched a few times since, and I'm still as gobsmacked as I was at the quality of the goal. But it was just such a great day, and it finished, you know, ultimately, I understand that a team has to win and has to lose, but it felt just like such a great day for you know, university women's football in particular.
Yeah, because I remember, Ben, it was would have been one of my last. Well, my last varsity would have been last year. The year before, I remember that one. I was heavily involved with that one, and the women's football ends up being 6-0 to Worcester that year, I believe. So it's that, like you say, from year on year, there, Mike. They're like, as you just mentioned, the competitive nature of that. And that just, you know, it echoes around women's football, but, you know, especially Tier 3 and Tier 4 this season. But even then, like you say, for women's football, especially, you know, back in the fold, you know, for yourself, that must have been really pleasing, because, as you say, you might have been pulling your hair out at the time. But as you say, you can look back at it now and be like, wow, that was one hell of a contest to put on. And as you say, a great advert for it.
Yeah, and I think people will look forward to that fixture this year off the back of it. I don't think it had been touted previously as one of the games to watch. But I think if you look at both of those games this season, and Gloucester have gone up into Tier 1, and we've had a very good season in Tier 2. The men's will always be competitive. There's always a great derby type game feel to it. So it's great to see a proper game of football, and it's what you want for everybody involved. You don't want people coming and trying to support a game and it's 4-0 at half time. It doesn't serve any purpose for anybody. So, you know, the hope is again that it's competitive again this year, and we continue to advertise what I think is a really good growing product.
Yeah, and you look at this year, Mike, you see, as you say, after the varsity success of last year, you know, we're almost coming up to only a month away now for another varsity 2026. The months go by too quickly, but as you say, league champions for yourselves. Again, another great squad of talent. You had that last year, but that's sort of gone a bit tenfold this year with the amount of talent you've got at your disposal. It must be a pleasure to be managing such a fantastic team once again, back to back. That's fantastic. Back to back varsities. That'd be incredible for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is I felt like a glorified cheerleader at times with this group, because they haven't needed an enormous amount from me. They're very, very talented. They're very hardworking. The biggest challenge for all of these girls is managing the next step of their career alongside their degree, alongside their clubs, because their club football is still absolutely the priority, and that's what we want them to do well on. Their university degree is the priority. Kind of university football is that bonus, that top up, that, you know, maybe if things aren't going particularly well on a Sunday, that we can give them some confidence on a Wednesday and then send them back feeling a bit better. And I think that's been really important for a number of the group, you know, and even towards loading players properly, you know, as they would if they were in hybrid environments or full-time environments, those little extra sessions or those extra games are really important top-ups. And, to be able to offer that to the girls has been important. And now it's about spreading the message of what we're doing and continuing to grow it. We don't want to go up and come straight back down again. We want to play against the biggest universities every single week, and we want to continue to grow the program and hopefully begin to produce, full-time professionals off the back of the work that's going on with the club and the program. So, yeah, been an enjoyable year so far.
Fantastic. And I suppose with that, Mike, in terms of, as you say, you look back at it now, and especially in terms of how much you've helped with the women's team, especially the men's team a few years back as well. Especially not the only sport you've been involved with at varsity level, though. Obviously, the Worcester Royals back in the day, the American football. I shouldn't say back in the day; it was only a few years ago. But with that, Mike, in terms of another sport for you, I always remember you saying about your passion for a bit of NFL as well. So, how pleasing was that to be involved with that a few years back?
Yeah, it was. It kind of came from nowhere, really. I looked at American football and thought I would enjoy it, and there was a local team in my area, the Farnham Knights, that I'd seen advertised around, but never really kind of dived into it. And I went around the welcome fair at Worcester and spoke to, your footballs and your crickets and all the other sports that I played. And when I met the guys at American football, they felt that I felt like I was a natural fit in that group. And, it turned into all of a sudden from let's go and do something with people that I like, to actually being on pitch and you got a helmet on and 11 blokes running at you. And it was a lot of fun. I absolutely loved it. I learned a lot about the, being able to run something with 50 players, and, I was chair of it for a couple of years. So that, that was a big experience in itself too. And we won a lot of games and we lost a lot of games. And it was just a lot of fun, and it was great to play under no pressure. I played football for 17 years before I got to uni, kind of as a 23-year-old. I started a bit later. So, I fancied something fresh and found a real love for it. And I think with American football, a football thing, there's a certain type of athlete and person that tends to appear at football, and same for cricket and other types and rugby, but in American football, there was 50 of us, all different size, shapes, backgrounds, and it was just a lot of fun. And, to go out there and do it and learn the sport. And I couldn't dare go back and play it now at the age of 34, and probably lost a few brain cells along the way, but had a great time doing it. And, still speak to some of the lads today, which is the most important thing, and lots of good memories.
Brilliant. And another one with that, in that sort of bid season, if you like, of as I mentioned earlier, the sort of quadruple in that aspect was your time at Stoke City. Obviously, you got a fair few people in that era of your life. From obviously, you got Tom, you got Pembo, you got, of course, Ez as well. Your wife, of course, now as well. And you look at that now. You look at that time of your life at Stoke, at a time when women's football, before that massive boom, just post-COVID, women's football was growing year on year, as we know. But at that point, did you feel that was building to something quite big at Stoke?
Yeah, so it kind of came out of nowhere. I was working with the university team at the time, and Tim reached out, at the back end of his time at Wolves, and we networked a little bit then. And then when he went to Stoke, he had the opportunity with Stoke City reserves. And I kind of went in a bit unassuming. There was a bit of imposter syndrome, if I'm honest, of, am I going to be good enough to work at a big club like this? And actually went in and learned, really, really quickly about what women's football is, because it is a completely different game, completely different thinking. And, I've seen so many from, the men's game come in and try and do the men's game in the women's game, and it just doesn't work. And I learned a lot that season and had a very successful, season with what was already there, and then got the opportunity the season after to kind of run it myself, and it was really, really good. And I gained a lot of confidence from it, gained a lot of momentum from doing it. And I would say I was really grateful of the opportunity to come in and be exposed to it for the first time, and had a lot of opportunities off the back of that period.
Fantastic.
Yeah, how important was it for you to, almost make that jump in and start building those connections instantly? Because as we know, women's football is a lot of having those links and connections to people.
Yeah, I did. To be honest with you, Ben, I wasn't. I didn't know if I was going to love it. I didn't know if it was going to be something I would pursue. But it really felt to me really quickly that this was an area where probably my personality traits would maybe be a bit stronger than in the men's game. I feel like the way that I approach coaching and working with people and players fits the women's game probably a bit more than it does the men's game. I met, like you said, lots of really good people there, including Ep6, who had a very good stint at Cheltenham. And I really felt like I'd found a place where I could be quite strong in it. And I didn't for a second then think I would be Stoke City's first team manager, which is obviously not what happened. But I really felt like actually here's a place in football where I gained some enjoyment and can grow and can learn, and had some good mentors around me at the time, and was doing my masters. So it felt like actually I've got all of these good things happening at the same time, and it's all making sense, which was exciting as a somewhat young coach. I don't know if I was still young at 27, but yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, you look at that time, as you say, Mike, with great fondness, and you move on there to another local club. Of course, you've kept fairly local around the years, and then you probably one of the biggest stints of your managerial career, if you like, was obviously your time at Stourbridge. And you looked at that time, obviously, I remember we were speaking about this, and I just found it so remarkable the journey you had there. Obviously, when you joined, in Stourbridge at the time, a tier 6 side, you mustn't have thought that it would go as well as it did. In 3 promotions in that time, it was one hell of a ride. I bet you almost look back at that sometimes and think, "Wow, what the hell happened there?"
Yeah, it was really timely. Ez, who we'd met before we were involved in football, and through various different means had ended up kind of in the same place. Ez had been contacted by Stourbridge, and they'd expressed an interest from her. She was known in the local area as a very good female footballer, and the club had mentioned that they were after a coach. And did they know anybody? And funnily enough, she did. So I met with the club and the manager of the time, Andy Fisher, and we met in a small pub in Halesowen and spoke about big dreams. And it was one of the first clubs to really pay expenses at any kind of level. It was really new. It was partially really well received. It was partially heavily opposed by, some of those involved in women's football. But it was something that's obviously been happening in men's football for a long, long time. And Stourbridge had decided they were going to take that first step. We didn't have an enormous amount. Andy had pulled together through a squad of players that he had and some players that he knew, and brought in some players that I knew from Worcester and from Stoke who were in the area. And we just set off with no real idea of how it was going to go. The first season was disrupted at the end by COVID. So we played 14, won 14, scored 92, I think, and conceded 3. So we'd had a brilliant season. We were 2 games away from winning the league, and then the season got kiboshed, as we all know. And then we go into season number 2, and we start the FA Cup in early August, and we win 5 straight FA Cup games and end up playing Wolves women in I think it was the first round of the FA Cup that year. We had 2 extra preliminary rounds and 3 qualifying rounds, and ended up winning all 5 of those, and got sadly knocked out by Wolves 3-0, and the season got cut off again. I think we played 3-1-3, scored 27 and conceded none. So we were sat there going, actually, we're stuck in tier 6. The season keeps getting ended on behalf of COVID. So we were a bit frustrated at the time, if I'm honest, and looking back now, having that time to build it gently at the right speed whilst being in tier 6 was probably a good thing. Thankfully, we got the upward promotion off the back of our 17 straight wins to tier 5, and we went up not really expecting anything. And we had a really good start to Tier 5, and then we lost our first league game ever as a management team. We lost against Sutton Coldfield 3-0, and Sophie Levick scored a hat-trick and then it ended up joining us a season later. But post that loss, we then didn't lose a game for the rest of the season, ended up winning it all, which was amazing, did the League Cup double, and so we'd kind of gone back to back out of nowhere, landed in the National League with all this momentum and just said, let's just consolidate, let's just work out where we're at and enjoy the, being up here in this league, and we get to play midweek, isn't this great? And then we lost the very first game of the season, which was the second loss in that stint, and we lost 2-0 away to Sheffield. I remember getting back on the way home going, blimey, this might be a bit tricky. And then I think we won 17 straight, and it was just unbelievable. The game after we lost against Sheffield, we beat title kind of contenders Lincoln 7-0 out of absolutely nowhere at home, and we just, off the back of it, just had this ridiculous momentum and belief. And at Christmas, we brought in a couple of the right faces, and they added in, and we just had an unbelievable group, an unbelievable culture. FA Cup runs that took us to the third round. We beat Derby County that season in Tier 5, 3-2, with a 92nd minute winner from 45 yards out. The wonderful Courtney Murphy, who was strapped up to the nines, came on and won us it. And we ended up then going to Cambridge United in the second round, and we beat them. I think it was 2-1 somehow, and everybody was still crawling after the Derby game. So we're off to Cambridge 2 weeks later, and we pull it off again. And then we pulled Sheffield United in the Championship, and we had Neil Redfern come down, and he was really respectful and polite, and that was the end of our FA Cup run. But we were dead proud of it, and it was a great time. Tier 4 was again, we didn't expect anything, and then we flew up and ended up winning the league again by about 10 points. So then we landed in the wonderful Northern Premier, and we got promoted that season with Newcastle United. So it was Stourbridge and Newcastle United were the two, well, what should have been underdogs really, but Newcastle went on, as we know, to win the league. And so for us to stay in the league, we had to relegate two stalwarts of the league, which at the time was Fylde and Huddersfield, and two brilliant sides who, interestingly, that season where the season got cut off because of COVID a few years back, Fylde, I think Huddersfield were top and Fylde were second. So shows you the strength of the sides, and staying in that league was a massive achievement for everything that we did. You are competing with a level of resources in Tier 3 that is outstanding. When you look at some of the names, your Wolves, your West Broms, your Newcastles, your Nottingham Forests. I mean, that's who we're playing every single week. So it's not the occasional cup game. That's got to be your bread and butter. So yeah, really proud of that. And what an incredible 5 years that was to look back with tons of memories and history, records broken and all of those things, and something that I think everybody involved in it will continue to reminisce about for years to come.
Brilliant. I always remember, Mike, where, fairly local to Stourbridge myself, and I remember before I joined Cheltenham, I remember seeing Stourbridge had got, like you say, up to Tier 4 and then Tier 3. And I looked at it because I was just studying where Cheltenham were in terms of the pyramid. I saw Stourbridge and I thought, fantastic. What a brilliant, not even knowing it was you at the time. And I saw that and I thought, well, that is one hell of an achievement. As I was just thinking, in terms of comparison to the men's side, Stourbridge, and I believe still are league below North and South, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're in and around that level, aren't they? So that's, seventh tier. And I thought to myself, wow, that is such an achievement. And you look at it then, and you say about the teams you were bringing to the War Memorial, Newcastle, Forest, Wolves, that must have been a proper pinch-me moment. But you look back at those years and the frustrations with the curtailed seasons, you must have looked back at that with a big level of pride that you were bringing teams to good old Stourbridge.
Yeah, it was strange. I remember, I can't remember which club it was, but somebody said, on the way down, everyone was asking, well, where is Stourbridge? What's the Stourbridge? Do you know what I'm saying? So you just don't expect to see, that level of, and we're not talking about one or two Premier League teams. You're talking about 8 or 9 named league clubs here, up there with Liverpool Feds, We were probably one of the only two unrecognisable names in the league that season. So just to be involved in it was great. I mean, it was brutal. You know, the league was as you'll know, is so hotly contested, and the club and all of the staff, we did everything we could, and we had every right to go down that season and finish 12th. And you know, we had a go at it, and we were plucky, but back down we go. And to stay in that league, and we had enough points. We had a stint before Christmas where we played 7 games. We got 14 points, so we were actually in one of the top 3 informed teams in the league in that stint. And we were just talking before the show started about how important it is for teams who come up to get points really early in these leagues, because your big name clubs tend to settle down after Christmas and find their rhythm. So we got into a really good place by the end of January and had enough points to stay up already, which, you know, thankfully gave us some sort of relief towards the back end of the season, even though we were constantly checking other people's scores as you do.
Brilliant. What a journey that was.
Yeah, and then moving on from there, then obviously you made the decision to leave Stourbridge. Kind of what was maybe some of the reasons around that?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, it wasn't my decision. The club had decided they want to go a different route and change the model and change what they were doing, and that's completely the club's choice. I had a brilliant 5 years there, and to be able to manage a first team in the same place, you know, as head coach for some of it and then manager for the back end of it was wonderful, and the journey we went on was brilliant. And just, you know, to walk away and shake hands after 5 years with those memories was great. So, you know, the club made that decision, and you know, ultimately full respect to them for whatever they do with the women's side. And you know, nobody or nothing will take away the memories of what we did. You know, and I still look out for Stourbridge and wish them the very best in everything that they're doing. And it's Meg Bailey leading the side at the moment, who was one of our players at the time and supported her into her C licence with Birmingham FA. And it's great to see her now taking the reins at the club and, you know, looking after the future of it.
Yeah, and then I remember you saying that you were originally planning to almost take a little bit of time away, and then Tom comes knocking and asks you to join at Cheltenham. How easy was that for you to reunite with Tom?
Yeah, it was actually a funny summer, because that was a summer that Ez and I got married. So it was very difficult to take anything new on myself, because I really wasn't going to be able to put much into pre-season. And so stepping into the right environment that was going to be really patient and allow me to kind of, I think, recover a bit after a crazy 5-year period, to settle into a new lecturing role, to kind of enjoy the period of getting married, because yes, it is centralised around one day, but you'll know that prep and all of that stuff, it takes over your life for a period of time. So between that and the honeymoon, Cheltenham was the perfect fit. And we were in Sicily on the honeymoon at the first game of the season, scrolling back through Twitter, trying to keep up to date with scores. And we got a video call from the change room after we'd won 3-0 with the celebrations in the middle of Sicily, which was lovely. So yeah, it was just a great fit for the year. Great to be back working with Tom and, you know, so many other familiar faces. I'd known Emo from Stoke and Pembo, obviously, and you know, to go there and just have a season of a little bit less pressure on me, and to be able to just go and focus on my A licence. And coaching was brilliant, and Tom was supportive of the fact that I had an incredibly demanding schedule that year. Was learning a lot about, you know, the higher education industry and all of those things. So it was, we had another brilliant record breaking the year there with the FA Cup run, and then the plate run, and you know, we'd done well in the league, and then we had the County Cup final as well. So there was a lot of really good stuff that year, and again, more fond memories, and really grateful for the year and for Tom allowing me to come in and just breathe a little bit for the year. So it was nice.
Yeah, it must have felt like, as you just mentioned there, Mike, it was a magical season, really. It felt like every game we were sort of breaking records here, there and everywhere in terms of attendance, or like you say, the FA Cup. And it was just a great, you know, dynamic to be around. And you look at the season in general, of course, right at the end, it was those 2 heartbreaks in the final. But as you mentioned, even just to get to that stage with that squad, like, it must have been especially for you and Tom, having known each other for so long, it must have been quite a dream season.
Yeah, and it threatened to be quite difficult.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there in pre-season and going, look, we're probably on paper, up there with relegation favourites. It felt like it was going to have to be a real effort to kind of pull something out the bag. And the recruitment, we brought in, and Tom deserves all the plaudits for that. Some good players from tier 4 and 5, and that's what you have to do at Cheltenham. You're not going to be able to sign big contracts, so actually you've got to get a bit creative with that recruitment. So, we've done that. We've worked really hard in pre-season. We've done, Tom was really open and allowed us to make changes to, the approach in pre-season, and we used as much of the information and data and experience that we had to produce the best possible pre-season. We won the first couple of games, and we were sat joint top at the time with, I can't remember who it was, who'd won their first 2 as well, and that was funny. And then we went through quite a tricky period where all of that kind of, all of that process we needed to go through of everybody learning the level, everybody learning each other, everybody trying to work out what Cheltenham is as a team now. It took us a little bit of time. And then about November, I think it was, or October, the cup competitions came in and hit like a truck. And we just got on this ridiculous run. And it took, I think ultimately we had some good draws in that cup run for sure. I remember playing, I think it was Norwich and Stockport, who were good tier 4 sides. They were honest, hard-working, physical. We played Moneyfields as well. And we just kept finding a way to win. And it wasn't, beautiful, dominant football, but that's not who we could be at Cheltenham. We were there to be plucky and hard-working and graft, and everybody dug in, all of the management, all of the players, everybody produced and worked really, really hard. And we ended up, post Christmas playing in the FA Cup. We'd beaten Wolves in the Plate, which, is something is a massively underrated achievement for the difference and disparity in resources between the two clubs. And it was just a triumph of good people working really, really hard. And I certainly look at that period between October and Christmas as an incredibly successful period, and coupled in there, like you said, with weddings of players and all of those things. Actually we'd all got quite close to the group and just dug ourselves out of this difficult position and produced miracle FA Cup runs and County Cup runs and plate runs, and ended up, like you said, you'd love to have had a trophy at the end of the season, but at the same point, you'd have ripped the arm off at the start of the year for what we managed to achieve in what could have been a very, very difficult season.
Yeah, definitely so there, Mike. And you look at where tier 3 is in general now, in terms of where tier 3 and tier 4, across the board, the northern and the southern divisions are looking extremely competitive. And me and Ben looked at it on the way to training last night, where on the final day of the season, is it Watford and Plymouth play each other, Ben, or is it Watford and Bournemouth play each other? Is it Watford Bournemouth, I want to say?
I think so, yeah.
And that's where, on the final day of the season, that could be, for whoever wins the title. And you look at it, and that's an incredible final day. But, you've got Watford, Bournemouth and Plymouth there in that incredible 3 there. And the players that those 3 sides have is quite frightening, quite honestly. Former Cheltenham striker and wonder star Una Lou in that Plymouth front line as well now. So we always love to give her a shout out on the podcast. But you look at it, Mike, and especially the Northern Division as well. Me and Ben have always mentioned this as the season has gone on. With the unique season as it is being, there is going to be a promotion playoff at the end of it as well, where it's going to be a North versus South side to get to the WSL2. It really is going to culminate in quite a really interesting season finale, isn't it?
Yeah, at both ends as well. So you've got, both sets of relegations seem really competitive. I think Halifax in the Northern Prem were stick-ons for relegation up until about 2 months ago, and now they're almost solidified mid-table status. And, to see Wimbledon down in the relegation for the Southern Prem is astonishing with everything there. And that for me shows the real, difference between where the league was and where it is. And I think you've got some big teams in tier 4. If you think Fulham are sat waiting, probably. Norwich, again, fantastic setup. they've got some great stuff going on there. So I think the National League is just getting stronger and stronger. And because the Super League and the Super League 2 are such small divisions, you're going to see these big names down in Tier 3 and 4. And, it's just getting more and more competitive every single year. The investment in so many ways has flowed through the pyramid already. And to see clubs in Tier 5 and 6 paying expenses is fantastic. And, there is a world in which Tier 3 in 10 years' time is maybe completely professional. We don't know. That it would be a fair assumption based on the growth. So the storylines this season are excellent. They're going to be excellent going forward. I think the only challenges with this league is that, you could lose 2 or 3 games all season and end up finishing third, because it's such a short competitive season. But, that's what makes some of these games really enjoyable. And, the cup competitions are fantastic. The FA Cup has its own feel, but that final day, feeling of winning a league after all of the graft is always special, and staying up and all of those things is great. So yeah, it's great to see good competitive leagues. It's a shame to see storylines like Billericay's, where ultimately the club have obviously gone in some direction with the team and they haven't been able to make it work this year. But you hope that those storylines become less and less common every single year.
Yeah, you mentioned the FA Cup there, Mike, in terms of how much joy you had with it during at Cheltenham and at Stourbridge. And you look at the sides that have made it to the 5th round this time. We had a great level of representation from Tier 3 and 4 in the 4th round, but obviously you see Oxford and Chatham making their way for it this weekend at time of recording. And you look at it and you think that is one hell of an achievement for one Tier 3 and one Tier 4 side to say, yeah, we're in the last 16 of the cup. That's quite the statement for this level of football. As you say, it's just going up in importance year on year.
Yeah, and it's nice to see these storylines, isn't it? You hope and pray. I mean, everybody sits there with the draw every single year, hoping and praying for the best possible draw, because it's not just about advancing in the competition. We know the incredible financial impact that an FA Cup run can have on a club, and Chatham particularly will feel a real benefit for this because of the nature and the size of the club. And it's great that the draw has played out this way, and to give them the opportunity to go and play against these big clubs is something those players will remember. It was great to see it advertised last night on TNT when I was watching I think it was the Winter Olympics. I can't remember what I was watching, but when I was watching whatever was on at TNT Sports, to see Chatham advertised was fantastic. So it's just really positive steps. Great to see. I watched the Stoke versus Wolves game on TNT this year as well. That's another really great step. So yeah, it's just snowballing in the right direction, which is great. Just got to keep doing the right things and looking after these players and making sure that all the people who work in these clubs and even the volunteers, we manage the load a little bit, because the levels of professionalism and the expectations now are so high from players and staff that it's really important that we manage the well-being of everybody involved and try and make it as enjoyable as possible whilst we go through this kind of really rapid phase of growth in the game.
Yeah, and obviously there's been that talk of potentially seeding teams in the Women's FA Cup as well. How dangerous do you think that could be for the National League sides almost making it and having these incredible storylines?
Yeah, I think you lose for me. I think the fear is that you want the FA Cup to be the FA Cup, and all of the storylines in the FA Cup come from the draw and how exciting it is, and seeding for me, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because ultimately, like I said, your Cheltenham Town have invested whatever they've invested in their women's team, even if it's not paying the players, even if it's just providing a pitch. That's an investment, because they could hire the pitch out to somebody and use that time. And if you take away the opportunity for a Chatham or anybody in Tier 4 to progress to this stage of the competition, because ultimately you're just going to get seeded against a Super League team in the 4th round, I think it would be a massive shame. I think it would be a disaster. I think it would ultimately go against everything that I think the FA Cup is, which is the opportunity for these underdog stories to happen. And I'd love for women's football to get to a place where you can see some of the upsets you've seen in terms of who was it, Macclesfield beating the FA Cup. I can't remember who it was in the previous round.
Alice.
But yeah, so and I just can't see. There is no world in the moment in which a tier 4 team is going to beat a Super League team. The disparity is so big that it's just not possible. So we're seeding a team into a guaranteed loss to ensure that these Super League teams progress to the next round. And I think it's really dangerous. And I was delighted for Chatham and York City to have drawn each other in the 4th round, because I sat there and I went, both teams can win it. Both teams have got an opportunity. Both teams will be, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, absolutely living for this day. And when it comes, and if it comes, whoever wins is going to earn £90,000, whoever it was, which for women's football is an astonishing amount of money. So, yeah, sorry if I got a bit passionate, but I think it would be so the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you're right there, Mike. Because sorry, Ben, sorry to interrupt, but yeah,
No.
I was just thinking. I just coming to my mind again of when we were discussing that the other week about the Women's FA Cup, and it's there was another point in that said that if these plans were to go ahead, there would be a point of they would have to look at entry level in terms of stadiums to see if the actual stadiums would fit requirements. And again, that really just feels like, Mike, that they're pulling the rug from these teams, because it could get to a point where the joy of the cup for the clubs like Oxford and Chatham is like you see the other week where Bournemouth, unfortunately for them, didn't play at the Vitality. However, they played at AFC Tottenham, and players like Khadija Shaw were playing on a non-league ground like that. And you look at that and you see that is really men and women's FA Cup. As you mentioned, that is the joy of the cup, isn't it? And you don't want to be taking that away from these clubs, because that really just defeats the object, doesn't it?
Wasn't it Pep Guardiola who came out this week and said about the who are yous, and that was one of his favourite things was going to these League 1, 2 clubs and experiencing those atmospheres and those stadiums. And I think that you've got a really magical concept and competition here, and it's one of the things that can step over between the men's and women's game. It does work in both games, which is great, and it's so iconic, and there's so much history that to soil it with these ridiculous ideas around feeding and clubs only being able to X, Y, and Z, I think it would be so damaging to the women's game. I was at some tier 7 sides as well this year that got to the 3rd or 2nd round. Again, like game changing. I remember Cowden Court playing against Burnley a couple of years ago, and I just thought it's just excellent. It's just exactly what you want. And in the first 10 minutes of that game, Cowden ran up the other end and nearly scored. And I was like, what are we watching here? But it's absolutely everything women's football should be. From tier 7 and 8 to the top end of tier 3 into it is by far and away the most ridiculous disparity in the world. But it's also brilliant. Like it's phenomenal to see. And it's, I played against Burnley, I played against Man United, I played against Khadija, do you know what I'm saying? That's something that these players, and for women's footballers who, weren't given the support and resources, so many started at 15, 16 years old, to see them given these opportunities on the back of being denied them for various different systemic reasons, to be able to have a football career that involves these teams is wonderful. So yeah, I would hate to see anything of such happen with the FA Cup that isn't completely directly in line with what's currently in place.
Yeah, great example of that, Mike, just finally on the FA Cup was, you saw United and West Brom last year where, West Brom and Wolves ended up playing Man United, and you looked at the West Brom for a long time in that game, kept the game at 1-0, didn't they? And you looked at that, yes, the heavens opened in the end when some of the bigger players came on, but for them to hold a WSL club for as long as they did was quite remarkable. And of course, speaking of United, we almost had our date with destiny if we would have beat Wolves as well. So that was, like you say, it's that close to one of the biggest days, if not the biggest day in the history of the club. So as you say, it's a competition that just keeps on. The dreams just keep on coming, don't they, for the FA Cup? It's such a great competition to be involved in, isn't it? But on to you, Ben.
Yeah, so then at the start of this current season, Mike, you joined the New Saints in the Welsh leagues. Kind of, what was that experience like moving over to, what is almost a very different league, but also a very good quality of league as well?
Yeah, I don't think I quite knew what I was getting myself into and the professionalism level of the league, and I got a very quick taste of that in that our very first league game was Cardiff City at home, who were the league champions, and it was on TV, and the film crews were there earlier in the day, and we'd had a pre-season that consisted of playing varying kind of sides from tier 4, 5, and 6. And we had a big rebuild, and there was a lot to do, and there was a lot of change. And I remember the first 20 minutes of that game, we were, I think we conceded something like 12 shots in 20 minutes, and it was 0-0, thankfully, at the end of that 20 minutes. But I remember turning to the person I was working with at the time and just saying, like, we're in trouble here and we need to change something very, very quickly. So, it's a really different league. It's very passionate. It's very, essentially it's the Super League of Welsh football. So there's a lot of really strong identities up there. There's a lot of players who are very passionate and very hardworking and have been involved in that level for a long, long time. Again, with the staff, there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of national pride as well, which was great to see. It was just a completely different experience from tier 3 or 4 or anything that I'd seen before. Not that one was better than the other, but it felt like these teams it was so tribal, and there were such strong identities that when you played against each other, and you play against these teams so often because of the cup competitions and the size of the league, like there's so much history and emotion. And me walking into the league for the first time learned that very, very quickly. And we had some really good results, and we had some results that we were frustrated with, but it was a completely different experience in terms of anything that I'd seen in women's football before. So it was nice. It was nice to go and do something different and do something, albeit it's not overseas, but in a completely different part of the game.
Yeah, because there's been so much talent there, Mike, in terms of that's come over, and some English clubs have, picked out a few of the players. Like you see, the likes of Phoebe Paul now and Lily Billingham, who are both at Cheltenham, and are now, I think Lily's back at Cardiff now. But Phoebe, as you say, is getting into the Welsh side now, on a more permanent basis. And you look at the quality in that Welsh league, as you say, that must have been brilliant to see that firsthand. And as you say, the passion and the tribalism there must, that everything must have just, you had a great run of games there as well. So what was, as you say, it was a short time, but a really enjoyable time for you there.
Yeah, so we've been working with the academy, been working with the first team, and life in other opportunities was growing. So things at Worcester and Malvern have progressed really quickly, which is great, and that put me in a place where I probably had to make a difficult decision, and it was the right time after the interim period to step away and to leave the guys in charge of it. Ultimately, more so because of how much I was doing, down in Malvern and Worcester. More than anything, it wasn't a dramatic set of issues I had with the club or anybody. It was much more so to do with kind of that balance of travel and work life and the opportunities that are appearing in the area. So it made a lot of sense, but I had a really enjoyable time. It was the resources available at TNS are incredibly advertising. It would rival teams in tier 3 North and South. Not to say it was full time, but it was certainly a very well resourced semi-professional club with a gym on site, a 3G on site. We had everything available to compete, and we were able to bring in some brilliant staff, including the wonderful Matt Bedford, who was with us at Cheltenham the season before. He was an instrumental part of what we did over the summer and in that first half of the season at TNS, and we built the academy there together as well. Had a chap called Adam O'Grady join us from Birmingham, and we worked together before at Stourbridge, and it's nice to be able to bring these experts together and do something really great. And we, ultimately at the end of that first game of the season against Cardiff, beat the champions for the first time in TNS's history, and 2 games later we then beat a very well resourced Wrexham. in a 4-2 win that, you know, we should be really proud of, because, you know, there is a brand new leader in the Welsh pyramid who will, I think, run away with it until they potentially then come across to England and maybe try and join the English pyramids in the women's system. But we'll see how that plays out. But we produced some excellent results, and we developed players, and we had a really good environment and a really good stint there. And I was really pleased with how I left it. Again, I think that's what I felt across all of the stints I'd had at Cheltenham and Stourbridge and Stoke and all of those things, leaving the teams in a really good place. And, you know, history records broken and lots of success. I mean, that's all I can ask for when I leave a club, and hope to leave it in a better place than when I joined, and was really pleased with the job we did there. And I think it's probably now time, if I'm honest, to look to lead. I think being a number 2 has been a big part of my career for a number of years. I have led in other environments, your Worcester unis and in other places, and I've had 2 very successful interim periods. So probably it's important for me for the next part of my career to go and look to lead and to be the person at the front of it, and to take all of the responsibility that comes with that, which is an exciting next phase. But yeah, I was really happy with things at TNS, and you know, it's a great group of girls who I hope will continue to develop and grow as they progress for the rest of the season.
Fantastic. Any more questions, Ben, on your end?
Just finally about Worcester women this year, obviously being such a successful league. You've got some brilliant players. I know we've already spoken a little bit about obviously working with Uni of Worcester women, but when you look at some of the quality in that squad that you've got and the amount of goals that you've scored, how fantastic is that to see, you know, just finally on how uni women's football is growing alongside the growth of the overall women's game?
Yeah, when I took the project, we hadn't had time to recruit, to speak to people about it. I was really kind of handed the team 3 weeks before the season started, and it was a bit of it was a really fun situation in that you just kind of have what you have at uni. You can't sign people halfway through the year. You can't you don't have all of the other pressures, which is you're worried about this club coming in and taking this player, and, you know, what would you do if this happened? Like, what you have is what you have. So, you know, when I walked onto the pitch for the first time, you're going, right, okay, what do I do with this and how do I make it work? And we had some play. We had one player who was playing at Tier 4 at Worcester City. We had other players who were kind of in and around that environment. And we had one player who arrived from Hereford Pegasus, and she was an absolute machine. And she's now doing incredibly well at Worcester City, and is attracting a lot of attention from Tier 3 and 4 clubs because she's an excellent player. And so when we had it that season, we ended up finishing 3rd, but I could see a really exciting group in that. We broke the record for their best ever cup runs. We got to the Conference Cup final and lost it, like we spoke about at the start. And then varsity really felt like a really good piece of validation at the end of a season of just trying to kind of get over the line with what we had, but it didn't feel like that all the way through. It kind of felt like us versus the world, and we had a really enjoyable season. But across that season, we spent a lot of time talking to people about the ambitions that we had for the programme, for the club, for the university. Through various contacts in the area, we felt like we could keep some of the most talented players in the area at the University of Worcester. We also felt like we could bring players into the area as part of being at the University of Worcester. And I think you've seen that a little bit with Cheltenham this year, and there's been other clubs as well who I think have benefited from it. And there will be clubs next season again who benefit again from the similar kind of thought process and recruitment strategy. And what it culminated in was just we managed to bring in, I think, the captain of England colleges last season. 3 players for Cheltenham, including 2 Welsh internationals. We have a player from Sporting Calcer in Tier 3. We have just incredible quality coming out of our ears. And I'd love to say that I've done lots of hard work this season to do X, Y, and Z, but really they're just so talented as a group. And it's been tough, if I'm honest with you, at times, because we were 17-0 up at halftime in one of the games and nobody was benefiting from it. And it's just it was just really difficult. It was a really difficult. It's been challenging to keep everybody motivated but focused on our target. There is a real call for trying to grow women's football in the right speed and the right way, and we are ultimately in the wrong division. Now we're out of it. We have a much more enjoyable season in front of us coming up. But what we've done is we've shown that if you invest in women's football, that you will ultimately produce results, and that's what we've done this season. There was a pressure on me this season to ultimately produce results, which is unique to certainly university women's football. But we had everything in place to be successful, and like I said, we've proven that if you do it right, you can be excellent, and long may that continue. It's not going to be a 1 year flash in the pan thing. We want to do this for years to come, and hopefully allow young women to continue to achieve their qualifications and continue their education whilst aspiring to be at the highest level of football. And varsity and the cup final stuff is a brilliant showcase of that. But hopefully in the years to come, league fixtures against the biggest universities in the country, your Oxfords, your Cambridges, your Loughboroughs, those are the games that we want to play, and that's what we've got to look forward to next season. So it's looked all rosy from the outside, but it has come with a very different set of challenges, and just wanting to look after not only our Wednesday afternoons, but the Wednesday afternoons of our opposition, which has been a little bit challenging at times.
Great stuff, great sentiment there, Mike. And just finally from me, before we finish things up here on this episode, we're speaking about how competitive Tier 3 has been this season, how much of that step up. We were talking about, as you say, you've had times in the Northern and Southern Premier Division. If I just had to put you on the spot, though, just finally, who is going to finish top of both the North and South? And of course, we also know that, of course, there will be the second place playoff for another place in WSL2 between a North and a South side. So who are the two sides who are going up? There you go, Mike. Answer that one.
Big question. I think the South is easier than the North, if I'm honest with you. I still can't see past Bournemouth. And you shouldn't see past Bournemouth because the investment and resource is excellent. They've recruited really, really well. Watford and Plymouth have done extremely well to keep pace, but Bournemouth, for me, are still firm favourites. The North is tricky because ultimately the answer should be Burnley, but it's currently Wolves. Burnley have had a manager change, and I don't know what the plan is, who's going to go in and get a tune out of those players. But I would say that given experience and given the quality again of the recruitment of players from the Midlands, I think Wolves might just sneak over and beat Burnley to the league, and all power to Wolves because they did win it 3 or 4 years ago and ultimately weren't promoted, which felt like a travesty. And having been in the Midlands and involved in the Birmingham County Cup, I can tell you that a lot of teams would be very happy to see the back of that Wolves team because it feels very difficult to get past them. So, and again, I'll go back to the beating them in the plate game. That is an excellent achievement from that Cheltenham season, and I have no doubts that Wolves have the capability to win the league. I hope that they're then given the resources to compete in the league above, because that only feels fair to that group of players and staff. So yeah, I would say Bournemouth and a slightly controversial Wolves.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mike. But yeah, it's been brilliant to have you on, Mike, in terms of just getting every bit of knowledge about from Tier 3 to Tier 6 to university. You've just had such a storied career. I bet it's been quite the whirlwind, hasn't it, over the last few years? But thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having him on, hasn't it, Ben?
It certainly has. It's been great to catch up. Someone that we missed from Cheltenham. It's been, almost weird not having you alongside us this year. The stories you come out with, the times on the coach have always been brilliant last season. So it's great to see you again.
No, pleasure, chaps. Thanks so much for having me, and good luck for the rest of the season. Hope to see you safe and sound in Tier 3 again at the back end of the year, and keep doing the commentary stuff. It's been fun to enjoy the highlights with you both talking over it.
Great. That was Mike Harris there from obviously Cheltenham, Stourbridge, Worcester Uni, and and the New Saints fame, of course. We can't forget the New Saints as well. So thank you very much there, Mike and Ben. It's been great to get another episode of the podcast. Hopefully get some more guests on in the coming weeks.
Certainly, yeah. Busy with Cheltenham, with uni work. Obviously, not any uni work for you, like you said at the start, but yeah, certainly is a very busy time of the year. But we'll keep them coming. Hopefully, more guests on the way.
I'll just be having more city breaks. Right, from me, Owen Mason, and Ben Stevens on the other side. It's bye for now.
Goodbye.